future is here. You now have the power to unlock the secrets of the hobby. An innovation that will change the way the industry works. The game changer is here. Card Ladder.
Hey everyone, this is Josh back with Cardboard Chronicles, and this week I'm joined by Josh Keene. How's it going, man?
It's going good. How about you?
Doing great, man. So Josh is a longtime collector. He collects a little bit of everything. I can't even pinpoint one thing. I guess I would say Michael Jordan cards, probably your specialty, some football cards. So we're going to talk about a lot of that kind of stuff. I'm happy to have an old school collector on today with all the investor-based stuff going on. I think it'd be a nice change of pace. So Josh, why don't you start us off? Tell us about yourself and your background in the hobby.
All right. Thanks for having me on. Well, I actually started collecting cards in 1987. I was 7. At the time, I was collecting garbage pail kids, and my parents sat me down, and my dad bought me a pack of 87 Topps baseball. I've been hooked ever since. Grew up playing basketball, baseball, and football, so I collected all 3 of those sports until maybe a week ago. I've never really taken a day off. I've just been basically buying and collecting through the years, rookies from each year. Main focus, I think, these days is LeBron, Jordan, what I would call some of the GOATs of each sport, but I also do a lot of football as well.
Yeah, so try your best to describe what you collect, because it is a lot. And I know that you focus, like when we talk, you focus on like the Hall of Famers and rookie cards, but maybe try to like sum up everything you do collect.
Yeah, for Jordans, it's mainly 90s inserts. BGS 9 has always been my go-to, just because having a mint copy to me has always been great. The Gem Mint, I think, or the PSA 10, I think, is from an investor standpoint where the money's at. But for me, it's just kind of always been able to have a nice mint copy of each card. So that has been my focus, I'd say, maybe the last 3 years. I do have rookies each year just from busting packs and buying singles through eBay. Wasn't really big into grading until about 2 years ago. I would say 99% of my collection was all raw. Graded a lot of the Jordans that I have myself that I've had since the 90s. You see things like these prism basketball and football just exploding. It's tempting to grade, but since I rarely sell, I just don't understand really what's going on with all of this, but as a spectator, I do enjoy watching it, and just seeing all these people entering the hobby has made it a lot more fun.
Yeah, so talk about that. Talk about how, like, I mean, you've been in this for so long that you've seen the ups and downs of junk wax and 90s inserts and then, exquisite stuff. And it's like, what's your take kind of on the current structure we have? Is it just like totally uncharted territory? Like, where are we at?
It is I guess, for the reason of when I look at cards back from, like, let's just use a Griffey Jr. or Barry Sanders rookie. For years, these cards hovered in the same price range, and $200 to $400 for a gem mint copy. And today, in the last 3-4 months, technically they've doubled. So I've never seen this from a price standpoint. And some of these cards are readily available. I mean, there's no shortage. You'll always see a listing for sale. So it's hard for me to understand, I guess, the big price aspect. A lot of me tells it that the card market is just kind of catching up, because some of these cards were vastly underrated and extremely undervalued. So it's nice to see some of those getting their due worth. It's a little harder for me, I guess, when I see like the Lucas and the trays, just like a base prism, and you see those prices. It makes me think that the Griffeys and the Barrys, even the Jordans and some of the LeBrons, are still undervalued. It's hard to say that, but it seems to be that way.
I mean, you've probably seen lots of players similar to Luca and Trey along the years that, people kind of got under the hype. Maybe not to this level, obviously, but can you talk about just like, trying to get people to understand that, like, yes, it's hot now, but like eventually the goats are going to separate themselves?
Yeah, honestly, this kind of reminds me back from maybe 1990 to 1993, being a kid, buying a Beckett magazine. I think just all of my friends back then, we used to rush to see the Up Arrows and Beckett. And when you see those up arrows, it's kind of that, I guess, for what they say today is FOMO. People have that fear of missing out, that I have to get this card now while it's going up. I see a lot of that in today's modern market. You see a Luca Prism, for example, maybe go up $200 in a week sometimes for a PSA 9 or a 10. And I think people are reaching out and grabbing these cards because they think, well, it's 2,000 today for a 10, and next week it could be 3,000. The concerns with those is just the number of in the pop report, how many of these cards are out there on the market. So I think, as a collector rather than being an investor, I know I'm going to be able to pick up these cards at any time. The price may be higher, but I kind of focused on some of those little, maybe more rare parallels, or even not so big of a set as, say, a prism. So I do remember this happening in, the early to late 90s, where you could buy a box for $50 and pull 3 Shaq rookies that used to sell for 100 a piece. It kind of has that feel of the 92, 93 season when Shaq rookies came out, and the prices were just outrageous, and they've come back down, and now all of a sudden today they're going back up.
Yeah, how important is like the pop report stuff? Because I kind of sense that like people are ignoring the pop report to a certain extent, just because like there's this argument of like, oh, well, more liquid cards are better investments because people can buy them in bulk and volume, but that's not really how the collectibles market traditionally has worked. It's been more of a supply and demand game.
Yeah, so I guess using like a Luca Prism Silver, because I think it's probably one of the hottest cards. When I see a PSA 10 pop of 12K, that just concerns me. I see that it's readily traded and available, but there's a vibe out there, I think, where people are maybe hoarding or acquiring multiple copies of these because they see the growth and the trajectory of the card. But I mean, at what point do you get concerned that you're going to be holding the bag on 35 Luca PSA 10s, where maybe you could acquire a blue out of 199 in a 9 or a 10 grade for the same price as 5 PSA 10s? And that card's not going to surface very often. I just think over the long haul, those are the cards that you want to pursue to have in your collection. The value, I think, will go up tremendously with those. Base cards come and go, they rise and they fall in value.
Yeah, so maybe like for people watching, what are some like parallels that you like to focus on? Maybe not just Luca, but other years, and maybe Topps Chrome, or just like different color parallels that have always interested you.
Yeah, I think it originally started with Topps Chrome for me, and having in basketball the black, the X Fractor, and the gold versus the base refractor or the base card. When Topps Chrome went away in 2009-10 for basketball, we waited a couple of years, and then you had the Prism that come out. And for me, it was the silver refractor because it felt like it was the Topps Chrome refractor. That's why I've always thought that the Prism brand itself has gained in popularity. But you see these Luca parallels, and there's red ice and pink ice that you can get in retail packs that sell for a good amount. But I think it's the hobby parallels that are numbered that I think catch my interest in the long haul. Whether their prices will go up from what they are today, I mean, that's kind of subjective, but I just think those are the holds for me as a collector, more so than having 16 Luca base. LeBron's, a lot of them are going to be those rare inserts, the case hits that they didn't have per se when Jordan was playing in the 90s. But if you look at the Jordan cards and in versus the modern cards today, a lot of the Jordans that have appreciated in value that are a lot harder to find are the rare, hard to pull inserts. The numbered parallels, I think, will always, to me, be king. I'd rather have a Skybox Rubies Jordan, for example, out of 50 than 700 PSA 10 base that are the same value. I just think that Jordan Rubies is going to continue to appreciate, and those cards appreciate at higher levels than, say, a base card, quicker.
What can people do to like get more educated on this stuff? Because like, and like for me, I come to guys like you, like I text you all the time with just questions on older sets and stuff, because I think what we're seeing is like all this new content coming out and people just sort of hoarding in on like 4 or 5 cards. I think the issue isn't that like they don't want to buy these rare cards, they just don't know how or what exists. So like what advice do you have for people trying to learn this stuff?
Well, somebody recently told me, and I agreed with this mentality, is you know that Prism's going to be the hottest or optic in this modern market, but there are other brands. There's the Revolution, there's the Certified, where you're going to have a little bit lower numbered parallels that are going to run much cheaper. So if you're a collector and you're looking to acquire rare modern players, I suggest looking outside of the big prism and optic sets, even though those were more mid-range products, whereas National Treasure's Exquisite would be the high end. I try to focus on rarity. That I'm not going to see this card again anytime soon, so that's one that I jump at. Where I think a lot of people in this market, honestly, are seeing the dollars and the appreciation of these base cards, and knowing if I buy today, I'll be able to make money tomorrow. Just kind of have to be careful, I guess, of profit gains versus unrealized gains, because unrealized gains can tank fast if people really start to focus on those pop reports. It's important to me when I'm looking at what I mainly focus on, which is Jordans. If I see a BGS 9 Jordan that's a pop 13, I'm going to make a run at that card because the odds of it resurfacing are slim to none. And when it does, it could be triple, quadruple the price. So I just think that those are the way to go rather than a 96, 97 base chrome Jordan, which is a great card, has seen huge gains. But I just see that card maybe cooling off a little bit more so than maybe a golden touch where there's only been 84 graded by both companies combined. So I think rarity has always kind of ruled, but base cards are just more for the masses.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll spread back into the rare cards as the people coming in now get more educated and start to figure out how it all works. It's just kind of on guys like you and I to help them along the way. Do you think that's right?
Oh, I absolutely do. And it's just if you're looking, I use Facebook and eBay a lot just to kind of see, because I think that it does show market trends when cards sell. For example, if a card sells for $1,000 and that's 200 higher than the previous comp, you're going to see more of those cards surface because people are going to want to capitalize on that gain. And then more and more of them sell because people have the idea that it's 1,000 today, but if I don't buy it today, it's 1,200 tomorrow. And I just think that can be misleading if you're looking to build a collection. I think you can still get the rarer cards that surface, the numbered parallels, at a more reasonable price than some of the gains that these base have seen. So for anybody that's coming in or is looking to build a PC, I think it's great if you buy 10 raw copies and you grade them and you sell them to upgrade or buy something different that maybe would have been unattainable for you had you not taken that approach. The pricing for BGS and the backlog for PSA, I think, speaks to that. And the prices keep going up for the grading, so people are like, "Well, it's gonna cost me more to grade this raw Prism card," and so people are buying lots of them. And you'll see that even sometimes lots sell more than the individual card if you were to buy maybe 10 separate. It's a base card craze that I haven't seen really in all of my years of collecting. But I do think that it's a way for an entry level collector to get their feet wet with the card market, to be able to grade and for lack of a better term, flip the card, and maybe 10 of those flips will turn into a card that was unattainable. I think that's the goal, and that adds a lot of fun to collecting.
Yeah, I really like that you called that out because I've had a lot of people reach out to me, like collectors that are, angry and upset that the new collectors are buying base, and I tell them, like, what are they supposed to do? Like, this is how they start, and they're trying to get some money to build up to get the rare stuff. They can't start day one and go buy Jordan Rubies. That's not attainable at all. So they have to start somewhere, and I think it's on us to, guide them through that, I guess.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, so talk about football cards. I've been on this huge football card kick, and I know I've been basically coming to you for like all my help on it. It's just like so interesting that there's like all these different eras, and it's just like basketball and soccer's gotten all the love. So tell me about football cards. Like what do you collect? What do you like about football? Which eras do you like? Stuff like that.
For me, I like the late '80s into the mid '90s, what I would call the running back era, where you had Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, Curtis Martin, Jerome Bettis getting 30 to 40 carries a game. There was no pass happy or spread offense. So when you look at that particular era, those are the players that you see the GOATs. You see someone like Jerry Rice in the same era have receiving records that look to be untouchable to me, even as we transition into a pass heavy or spread offense that you'll see more so than the 80s, the 90s. It's transitioned solely, I shouldn't say solely, but for many into quarterbacks, which I don't quite agree with, but I do see a lot of the money in the hobby gets focused that way. There's so many great players when you look at the Adrian Petersons, the Larry Fitzgeralds, the more recent players that really are the top three at their position and maybe top 5 or 6 all time when it really breaks down to it. You're seeing the Peyton Mannings, the Randy Mosses, their early cards starting to rise, starting to increase. I think people see a lot of value in what I would call goats of the gridiron in comparison across other sports, mainly basketball. So with football, you'll see Baker Mayfield, DeShaun Watson, Dak Prescott, the Mahomes, the sexy quarterbacks gain a lot of the financial attention, but there's a lot of great football cards that can be picked up. Tomlinson, any of those guys from the 2000s or the late 90s. That's kind of always been my sweet spot. I mean, I PC a lot of football. Peyton Manning, LaDainian Tomlinson, Andre Johnson. I have a lot of Larry Fitzgeralds. Big on Deshaun Watson. It's pretty tough to go out and get Mahomes now. I was a little late on that one, but boy, for those who did, you did well.
Yeah, I've seen your Deshaun Watson stuff. It's pretty nice. I mean, so like, did you pick Watson over Mahomes? Is that something that happened, or you've been buying him since Mahomes went up?
Well, in 17, when they came out, I bought Patrick Mahomes because he was sitting on the bench, and I didn't know anything about the guy other than I've seen 4 or 5 QBs come from that Texas Tech system. I was very iffy. I had never seen the guy play, but he was cheap. Watson, I did not buy as a rookie. There was a lot of hype built into Watson when he got drafted because of the college career. But as soon as I saw that injury and I realized that this guy is going to be more of a passing quarterback versus maybe an RG3 who was a runner, I think people do look at Watson as a runner, but I don't moving forward. So when he was injured, I loaded up on Deshaun Watson just because he's a guy I see 10 to 12, maybe the next 15 years. He could be a top 5 quarterback passing wise.
Yeah,
So that's kind
I hope people are picking up the nugget that you're giving, which is you're buying guys when they're down.
Oh yes, it's very hard to buy people when they're up. I mean, even when Mahomes went up before the Super Bowl, I thought, oh, I'm glad I didn't buy any at these prices, but a lot of them have doubled. And so I think that's another aspect of people coming into the hobby that they might have a hard time because I think we all do at times. Is if you're looking at a card and you think a base prism PSA Mahomes is 2,500, can it really go any higher than that? Um, that's when I kind of look at those alternatives, a PSA 9, a BGS 9, if you're looking to collect them. I'm still big on buying the raw cards of the football rookies because I think the best time is upon product release. They're freshly packed pulled. You'll see people list them on eBay. It's your best chance at buying a raw gem versus waiting 3-4 years down the road because you don't know the quality of the person who had the card and the care that they kept of it. And so you have scratches and things like that. That's why some of these Prism Pops, for example, which is the hot card, have a low PSA 10 is because people don't always penny sleeve and keep care of their cards when they come out of the pack. So for people who are just starting out, I would recommend when a product is released, chase as many of the cards that you want right away because they're fresh and probably in better shape.
Yeah, I was buying like 2011 Julio Topps Chrome Refractors, Julio Jones, and I just like gave up and bought a PSA 10 because dude, they're so screwed up. I was buying them for like $40 a piece, the raws. I'm like, oh, I gotta get a 10 on one of these. No chance. They're just
Yep.
absolutely effed.
Yep. And that's just the thing is because if you look at those cards when they came out, they were $3-4 for a refractor. So they ended up in 3-row boxes. A lot of people didn't penny sleeve them. And that is what I'm referring to as the pop. You know, those cards back in the day, the pop report is key because of how well the cards were maintained. Today, I don't think people are busting $1,000 Prism wax boxes and throwing the Luca Raw in a 3-row. That protected out of the pack because of the value of the cards. So when I look at modern cards, 18 to present, which is when the prices started to escalate, I expect those to be a minimum 9 when I'm seeing a raw. They're well cared for. They're pricey right out of the pack. Versus like for example, that Julio you're referring to was a $3-4 card, and I know because I have 2 or 3 of those. So and you see them now, and it's the speculation of what a 10 would be. They're a lot harder to grade in 2011 than they were now in 2018 to 20.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like some of those old football cards I've been looking at, the pops are low and the gem rate is low because they were cheaper, nobody graded them, and then it just wasn't worth grading back then. And now today people want to grade them, but it's too late. So the pop's going to stay low. So it's just like this, it's like this weird little glitch in the system where there's just all these crazy low pop cards just sitting out there.
Yep. Yep. And they don't surface that often. And, and football's it's another cheaper alternative, because I think you're buying great players, great cards that in some ways are equally as rare as these basketball. It's just basketball has that global audience versus football, which is pretty much, US. That's the only difference, I think, and it's where you see the values.
Let's talk about that, because that seems to be the new hot topic for investors to point to, is that like one game is global and the other isn't. I'm still seeing a lot of data that points to United States being the driver of the card market in terms of like what people are buying. I know that like basketball, that's different for, Asia. There's a ton of purchasing power for basketball. So basketball is kind of its own thing, but there's like a lot of talk about soccer versus football. And I feel like the soccer stuff's getting too much attention relative to like the purchasing power of football in America. What do you think about that?
I do. I seeing soccer on the rise, I thought it was a little far behind because of the global presence like basketball. So it was shocking to me to see that soccer cards were so low value. But with football, they're not making as much prism football as they are prism basketball because of the worldwide. I just think that when you can see it when you even open a box, for example. And I think that's another thing for people who actually open up the boxes, the packs, which now are getting a little bit more expensive. You open a box of prism basketball, you're getting 1 to 3 colored parallels. When you open a box of football, you get 1 per pack. They just didn't make as much football product as they did basketball. Plus, the retail market on basketball is substantially higher than, say, football. So some of these football products have relatively low production right out of the gate. They may still be printing 1920 prism basketball retail for all I know, but the football is long off the shelf. And there's a big difference, I think, in that. And football price points are cheaper, but you're also starting to see the appreciation, like you mentioned. People are catching on to the low pops in comparison to some of these, the Giannis, the Prisms. They're great cards. There's nothing wrong with having those. It's just I think that you can get a numbered parallel for pennies on the dollar compared to what those base are in the grand scheme of things.
I think this will all kind of balance itself out over time as people get more educated, like I said. You do have a crazy story about the Jordan Red PMG. Tell me that story.
Okay. So I was 18, almost 19. I worked construction in the summer. It made me appreciate going and staying in school to finish my college degree. A guy opened 4 wax boxes at a local card shop of the metal. The only PMG he pulled was the Jordan. I had never seen a PMG nor knew anything about what that card was. We were excited because the guy, when he pulled it out, said he thought it was about a $500 card. I asked to buy it, and it was more because I'm a sucker for Jordan on a red card. The card on the left side of the edge, as I remember, it had 4 white specks. And I thought, this card is not meant. Maybe I buy it and send it back to Fleer, and they'll replace it. But it was the first serial number Jordan card I had ever seen. I asked the guy to sell it, and he told me it was $650. I'll never forget this. My check was $693 for 2 weeks as a brick tender. I drove over to Wells Fargo. I withdrew it, drove back to my card shop. I bought the card. I put it in a penny sleeve and top loader. For years, it just sat there, and it wasn't until probably 2013, 14 when I saw a BGS 85, which is how mine is graded. It's an older label. When I saw one sell on, I think it was Probstein for $25,000, I thought, you've got to be kidding me. And it wasn't really until then that I knew what I had. But it is my pride and joy. People will say that's a grail, and I stumbled upon it, pure luck. Parents were not happy spending that much money on a basketball at age 18. So my consequences when I got home, but now it's a funny story because it's just something I would never sell because I cannot replace that exact copy. And just the story that I have of pulling it. I still know the guy today. He still collects, who I bought the card from. He's a little older, and he's not buying wax anymore, but he always asks me how his red PMG's Jordan is doing, and it's staying out of the light.
That's incredible. I mean, the ROI on that, people are probably doing the math. It's just like, holy smokes.
lucky.
Yeah, I mean, you have people that are like, oh, only invest in stock. Sports cards aren't a good investment. But man, there's definitely some cases where it's an excellent investment.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I mean just the way the market's appreciated. It's more artwork for my generation. I think I'm not going to buy 16 paintings. I'd rather have 16 nice cards. Some of those 90s inserts, which was my era, they just kind of feel like modern day pieces of art. That's one of them.
Yeah, so you've been collecting for a long time, and I'm sure that you've always had this feeling that like, there's not a lot of collectors out there. It's something that you do for yourself, but it's not like this mainstream thing. It's not cool. And now that it's becoming more mainstream, what do you think about that? Like, has it changed the way you feel about it, or is it just still kind of your hobby to yourself? What do you think?
Well, I was introduced to the Facebook groups, the social media aspect of card collecting 2 years ago by who became a great friend, Chris McGill. Just kind of introduced it. It blew my doors off and opened me to a whole new avenue of collecting. Not only of seeing cards that maybe I had never seen outside of eBay, but then just having the availability to pick up these cards. So the last 2 years with social media and being able to acquire cards online has really allowed me to take my collection to another level. Lately, I think the hardest part for me, even after all these years, is cards are becoming unattainable price wise to the point where I have to start moving cards that I may have 3 or 4 copies of to obtain a card I don't have. Although most people would do that, like I have 6 big men on court Jordans, and it's not a card I could ever sell. But I can assure you, if a seventh one surfaced, I would buy it. It's just for me, it's the collector aspect. I don't necessarily care what that card is worth. Either way, whatever somebody would offer me for it would be less than what I think it's worth. You're seeing a lot of that. It's also driving prices. But I've switched over a little bit outside of the Jordans and LeBrons, and I've been secretly buying Ken Griffey Jr.'s, Barry Sanders, and a PSA 10 grade. They're extremely cheap. They're extremely fun to have. These are all cards I loved as a kid. I picked up a couple of them that were Pop 1, Pop 2, Barry Sanders gems for cheaper than you can get a Jason Tatum raw prism rookie for, and that blew the doors off of me. So that's kind of reinvigorated my interest in the hobby. Is you you can look at the cards that everybody's looking at, but there's a lot of cards that are hidden around the corner that maybe people have forgotten about that you wanted in the past that you may not have been able to find. Now they're out there and they're I think priced right, and it's just kind of lit a new fire for me as far as collecting.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, Chris McGill, obviously my partner in crime with Card Ladder and Crossover and all these things, he texted me the other day and said that you were thinking about leaving the hobby. So what's going on there?
I was strongly for 2 days. Actually, I did. I took off the eBay app. The problem I was having is just that when I see these prices today, I have to step back and ask myself because I've always been a buyer. Josh, not. I mean, I'll occasionally trade, but I'm not a seller. I'm not a grader and then sell the cards. I started doing that recently, but I realize in order to obtain the cards that I don't have that I want, it would it would require me to sell a lot of the cards that are in my permanent collection. And I wasn't willing to do that because they're in my collection for a reason. I've never wanted to get rid of them. But as these prices seem to grow, it's a little bit harder to fund these purchases yourself. And you'll see a lot of people, a lot of people that I know, big collectors, have been consolidating, for lack of a better term, taking 10 cards that they've had that they do like, but be able to acquire maybe 2 or 3 big cards. The problem for me is even if I do that, I don't know that I'll be able to circle back and get those 10 cards again because of what the values are today. So, for lack of I would say that the market is sort of pricing me out as a buyer today. I'm not going to pay some of these prices that I see, particularly for modern, because I just don't know if this is sustainable. I don't want to say that there's a bubble or scare people because that's not what I believe in. I just think that the cards that I want to collect are gaining in popularity, and everybody else is kind of on that
Mhm.
boat. And it as time goes by, it's harder to stay on that boat to keep fishing.
Yeah, it's like you wanted everyone to see what you saw and you wanted to feel right, but then at the same time, like you are right, and now you have to pay more.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I mean, people that watch this show know that I'm like a big time consolidator. I think I only have like 60 cards in my entire PC. So we attack it very differently, but I can totally understand like that feeling that, you've worked, especially for someone like you who's been around so long, that like you just have way more attachment to these things. You've had them so much longer.
Yeah, and it's just they're hard to let go. That's the way it is with cards for me. They're hard to let go, and I have been doing the consolidating thing. I have a lot of regrets, although those cards are readily available. I am moving. I just have regrets of letting cards go, even though I'm attaining cards I never thought I would be able to afford or find in years past. So there's pros and there's cons. It can go either way for you.
Also, on that note of like you being so emotionally attached that you refuse to sell anything, is that why cards have like this intrinsic value to them? Is that why people are coming in now? Because they feel like, with stocks and some of these other things, there's like no attachment. You're just sort of like doing it financially. Whereas cards, you kind of get this whirlwind of financial, you get sports, you get, items that you get to hold. And is there something to that? Is that kind of why you think maybe it's caught on recently?
I personally think so. I think that if you're investing in a stock market, everything's on the computer. It's very similar to eBay in a way that if you see a 97, 98 Court Masters Jordan on eBay, card looks cool. But when you acquire that card and it comes in the mail and it's in your hand, the card looks beautiful. And there's a big difference, I think, when you're looking from an investment standpoint of just seeing numbers on a computer that may go up or down daily, decimal points, versus having something flashy, shiny in your hand that you can appreciate and enjoy. That's why I think a lot of the gains that for me that I've seen are all unrealized, whereas some people are capitalizing on those. It feels similar to a stock market to me. Today's market, today's hobby, more so. I mean, I still run across a lot of diehard collectors like myself who very much struggle letting go, and I come across some people who can buy a card and 3 days later it's available for sale. So I don't know how to do that, but it's because I have a hard time letting go.
So would you ever get to a point where like you'd start to sell? I mean, let's say it's like in the future and you've got a chance to quit your job or something. Like, what would make you sell? Like, just how deep is this? You're getting uneasy just thinking about it.
Right. Yeah, I am. When you said to sell off everything, I wouldn't be able to sell off a lot of my Jordans because I didn't start collecting for the investment standpoint. It's just those cards tell a history of basketball for me. They remind me as a kid, a lot of those were unattainable because it was pre eBay and you never saw the card. You just saw like a Sharif Abdul Rahim and you're like, wow, this insert's cool, but I pulled a Sharif Abdul Rahim. I didn't see the Jordans until eBay, even going through card shows. So some of those 90s Jordans that, you may see 3 or 4 listed at a time, back when those came out, you never saw them. You just didn't have the availability and the technology that you have today to have access to these cards. And I think that's another thing that separates maybe the level of education for somebody that's coming in today is that you're seeing all these cards available all the time online, and the perceived rarity might be a little bit lower to you, but some of those cards are very, very hard to find. The only reason that you're seeing them is because the market's so large and there's so many people. Every once in a while, these cards surface. And I just think that those are the ones from a collector's standpoint that down the road are the ones that people chase. They're going to look back and people are going to want those prism golds more so than a prism base. And it has more to do with rarity, but you just never see those. And some of those cards that I have just never let go.
I think you might be the first person I've interviewed that doesn't have an Instagram account. Do you even have an Instagram account? Do you?
I do not yet. No.
So like people are gonna be asking me like, how do I find this guy to ask him questions about stuff? So like, I guess just what advice do you have for people? Where can they go to maybe get help? Not necessarily from you, but like what groups are you a part of? How do you learn all this stuff?
I just recently joined a LeBron group, and it's more just to look at what people have, but it's an area that I want to learn more about LeBron's because I've been collecting LeBron since he was a rookie card. But I use those Facebook groups a lot because you're going to see people in there posting cards for sale, people commenting on cards that people post. That's the majority of. That's how I've met the majority of the collectors where I'm at. I know Instagram opens up a whole nother world. A couple people have been trying to get me to join, and I will before the end of the month. Right now, I just kind of like to stay in the shadows. I consider myself somewhat of a private collector locally here in Nebraska. Know a lot of our local market's huge. We had a card show today with a couple hundred people. So I like in-person card shows, but the where that I've learned the most is basically through the Facebook groups. eBay can kind of be confusing for, I think, newer collectors and even somebody that's been around for a long time like myself, because when you look at sold listings today, it's a little harder to know what actual sale prices take place versus maybe cards that are, and I don't like to use the word, but maybe are shilled or manipulated in a way. Having a friend buy a card for 1,800, the card gets listed for 3 days later because that's what they want for the card. You see a lot of that going on, or you hear rumors of it. So I just think that the groups allow you to chat with other people that are in the same level as you, the same forum as you, to kind of have that information presented. Because before those groups, I didn't know about shilling, card manipulation, trimming, or any of these quote unquote scandals that people try to ruin the hobby with. Some of it's blown out of proportion, but at the same time, these are the types of things you want to be educated on, so that you're an informed buyer and an informed collector.
Totally. All right. Well, you're the man of many cards, so let's see some cards and talk
Well,
about kind of like what your feelings about them, not necessarily just like what they're worth and their grade and stuff. Maybe like what stories you have about them that you love.
yeah. So I'll show my favorite football card first. This is a 1994 playoff contenders back to back. It has Emmitt Smith on the front. It has Barry Sanders on the back. It is a Pop 1 PSA 10. The reason I like these cards is actually a lot of reasons. It was the first year of playoff contenders, which is today now a big set, mainly for the autos. But this insert was one per box. It's a 60 card set. Very, very hard to pull. And it's like what we were talking about earlier, the pop's low. The card's extremely condition sensitive. There may be 3 9s out there and just this one PSA 10. So it's kind of the pride and joy of my football card collection, but it took me years to find it, and I just acquired it about 3 months ago. Another one that I really like is the Ken Griffey Jr. autographs, the on card, because I just think that the signature of Griffey was beautiful. I recently picked up a 10 and a 9 of this card from 2003 SP Authentic. When I look at the prices of the Griffey autos, they just criminally seem cheap to me. I don't understand it. Without injury, Griffey to me was a top 3 baseball player of all time. Prices are extremely reasonable. I look at Griffey and Barry Sanders as kind of the best players of the 90s for those particular sports. I've been doing some LeBrons. It's a little harder now to buy them graded, but I recently picked up, I believe this is a courtside silver LeBron. I paid $25 for the card raw, which tells you how little I knew about the card. Even though I bought this card 6 months ago, only 2 have ever been graded by BGS. Both of them are gems. There's no clue on the value of it. It's more of the rarity for me. I've only seen 3 of these cards total sell since they came out. So a lot of what I'm buying is kind of what I mentioned earlier, a little bit rarer pieces that I'm not going to see tomorrow if I don't buy today. Regardless of what the values are, I just think that they're great buys. They're cards that I look at my Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith back-to-back every single day after work. When I go through my cards, it's one of the first cards I look at because as a kid, it was my favorite football card all the time. Some of the LeBrons, you get lucky with. I bought a Prism Silver from the first year. It's a USA. And then I bought the silver base card. I bought the lot for $152 on eBay raw. I graded both of them. They came back 9s. I was buying those because at the time, Ben Simmons was hot, his silvers. And I thought, why are these modern silvers worth so much more than the old ones when there's 200 Ben Simmons on eBay and I only see this one LeBron? So I loaded up on the early Prism silvers because to me, it was like the 96, 97 Topps Chrome basketball. Those were tough. That was a retail only product. I don't know if everybody's aware of that in 96, 97, but those first year silvers and prisms are the reason I think prisms today are worth so much, is because they were short printed and that they were, rare. So though not particularly valuable, my Jordans are kept at a different place and locked away. Those are some of the cards that I thought in the last, 6 months to 2 years that I've acquired that you can still find deals out there if you're willing to research, to learn, product runs, maybe print runs versus what you're seeing today. In particular, those courtside silvers, I, I believe from Select were pretty short numbered, but printed, I guess, but they weren't numbered. So nobody really knows. It's kind of that mystery. But the pop report is what tells me that that card is, is what you want, because you just don't see, not only they grade well because both are gems, but there's not many graded, which tells me that there's not many made.
Yeah. I always laugh at the 2012 Prism Silver because I think you said you paid $100. I bought one for like $80, like less than 2 years ago. And then, like you said, everyone cared about the rookie ones at that time. Nobody cared about 2012. And now it's just funny to me that like that card is just like sent down from above, that it's like the most holy of cards. And 2 years ago, people couldn't care less about it. So talk about like just going the complete opposite of hype and like buying cards when nobody cares about it.
Well, it started with me, I guess. I looked at color schemes because I think design plays a big part in it. So I look at, like, I picked up a Luka blue prism because it matched his uniform out of 199. I picked up a couple of Jason Tatum green prism rookies because it matched the Celtics uniform. I started to look for even cards that just from an aesthetic appeal separated themselves versus maybe a Tatum purple, which doesn't even match anything on the jersey. So I kind of looked at those because from an aesthetic standpoint, the value was there. They were cheap. But they were great looking cards. And when you look back at the popular Jordans from the 90s, a lot of them are the ones that are aesthetically pleasing. They don't always have to be rare like a hot numbers. And I think that even though the card's readily available, the card's beautiful. It's always going to be something like Scoring Kings that bring people back and say, it's a must have in a Jordan collection. So when I started to see like these Prism Silvers from 2012, I started with LeBron because usually the best player of that era will, in most cases, pass the value of a rookie card. And I don't know that people see that in today's market. And what I mean by that is the 96, 97 Kobe Chrome is the one exception where it's worth more than the Jordan. But pretty much every other year that the Jordans were around, there was no rookie that really touched the Jordan prices. And so today, when people are paying all these prices for a tray, I start to focus on maybe the second year Luka, because down the line, the second year Lukas are going to be big. They always were with Jordans and LeBrons. And I think from a value aspect, that's kind of what you can look for, is aesthetically pleasing. Rarity does help, but sometimes it's just like that Tatum green prism is now, those prices are unreal, and they were $50 cards 6 months ago. And they weren't particularly tough. It's just the card's beautiful. It matches. It has that design. The thing is, I missed the boat on the Exquisites. All of those cards, those are regrets. I didn't. At the time, I felt those were gimmicks, and now you look at those, and those are the cards to own. But looking back at it, I missed it. Aesthetically, they're just beautiful. They were pleasing. I would recommend that for people coming in, is look for cards that stand out, that are beautiful, great to have in hand, maybe condition sensitive. I think there's a lot of value to be had in cards like that.
Yeah. I'm not even interviewing you, dude. I'm just soaking it in. I'm a listener at this point. Just like it's just really hard to find guys that have such great experience and knowledge with it. It's just everyone's got a YouTube channel and everyone's pumping base cards, and it's nice to have like someone kind of level you out with like, here's how it looks. If you step back a little bit, right, here's the full landscape of cards you didn't know existed. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Any parting words? Any last cards? Anything else?
No. I'm back in the hobby after a 2-day hiatus. It felt like a couple of years. I told some of the guys I'm in a Jordan chat group with, and the same reason that I told you, it's getting harder. I went to a card show today, and it had to learn to let go of a couple of cards to obtain cards that I didn't have. It's growing on me. It's painful, but it's a must. And you must be willing to kind of, I think outside the box to collect and obtain the cards that you want in this hobby in today's market. But it's still as enjoyable as ever, as long as you're just not focused solely on the money and you're wanting to get those great looking cards in hand. That's what I would recommend for anybody coming in.
Well, I'm not going to say anything else because that was a great ending. So we're going to leave it there. It was great talking to you, man. We'll do this again soon.
Thank you, sir. Have a great one. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.